Hey guys, welcome to episode 4 of Offline Sessions. In today's episode, we invited Cameron and Alice, two expats who have lived in Singapore recently, to talk about a little bit of cultural differences that they experience in Singapore and also what they think of Singaporeans. And we gave them a little bit of insight as to what Singaporeans might think of expats. So stay tuned for that. We want to ask a lot of people, and we're going to start with you guys first, is introduce yourself without saying what you do for work, without saying where you're from, without saying your age. So you can do it in any format, short or long. So what's your answer?
I'm Cameron. I've lived in Singapore for a couple of years now. I think what is typical of me, or what I find being a big part of my identity, is living in multiple countries. So I've moved around quite a bit, and I think something that I've discovered most recently about myself is that I don't really identify with one culture or one country. I think that's me in a couple of words.
Great. And Alice, what about you?
Yeah, I'm Alice. I've been in Singapore for about a year, so fairly new to Singapore. Yeah. To describe myself, I would say one word, maximalist. So I like to maximize everything that I have. Let's say if I have like 1 hour, I want to maximize, like the value that I can get out of that 1 hour. If I have like $10, I want to maximize the value that I can get with that $10. So I would say yes, if I have to describe myself, that would be the word.
Okay. So this question actually came up because we thought it was interesting, because when I first saw the question, I found it very hard to answer it myself. So I'm going to ask you now. I'm not sure if you have a chance to prepare. Why not you let them hear what you have to say if you have to introduce yourself?
Okay, I think my statement is quite similar to Cameron, because when he said it, I was like, wow, that's actually something that I would say as well. I'm Wei Yue. I would say I'm a third culture kid because I wasn't born in Singapore, but I grew up here. And for the past 10 years or so, people ask me where I'm from. I cannot give one solid answer, like I'm from Singapore and I fully identify with Singapore or whatever. So I think I just came to a conclusion that I'm a global citizen. It's a very cringe term, but don't laugh. But I think, I think that's what defines me.
Okay. I mean, I'm a Singapore citizen. I can never ever say I'm a global citizen. Okay, I'll just give you guys. I thought about this. I've thought about this for more than a week. I actually gave a little bit of the answers. I'll share with you guys. When I first thought of the question, I thought of a few keywords. I'm a rebel. I'm a dreamer. And I'm brutally honest. Yeah. So I feel like those 3 words would represent how people would think of me. For example, how she would think of me. So just to give you a bit of more detailed explanation of each one is, since I was a kid, I was a rebel. Like whatever people said was do this, I was like, nope, I'm gonna go the other way. Right? What's the second one? Oh, dreamer. So I love to dream about things that are a little bit unrealistic. Yeah, ever since I was a kid. Right? And the last one was, I'm a bit brutally honest. So she always tell me like, oh, but you shouldn't say this. It's gonna offend some people. I'm like, but that's just me. So that's a bit about myself. Okay, so that's one question that we want to ask people. So you two are the first one that we asked. We thought it would be interesting. I think everyone have a different way of answering that question, short or long, or maybe like a global citizen, right? Okay, so I think before we get to the more detailed stuff.
Can I ask you a question as well? Is that
yeah, sure.
So what is at this point your unrealistic dream? Like you're slightly unrealistic. What makes you a dreamer right now?
With regards to offline, would you say with regards to offline?
Anything really? Ideally not.
I want to change the culture of a country.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Which is
amazing.
I told her about it. I think it's very hard. I would not confidently say that, I would be able to do it in 3 years, 5 years. But I think if something has to happen, it has to start somewhere first.
Yeah.
And maybe it might be the next generation or future generations that can truly change the culture. Yeah. Sorry, that sounds a bit idealistic.
No, I like it.
Yeah, a good question. So before we get into the more some of the other questions are a little bit deeper. So we wanted to know a little bit about you guys. We know a little bit about you guys, but we think that maybe there's some other stuff that we don't know. So one of the first question is, where else do you live apart from Singapore?
Shall I just start from the beginning? So I was born in Canada as a little kid. Well, as a baby, obviously. Then we lived there for about 2 years with my parents. So my parents are both from different countries, actually. So my mom is Mexican, my dad was Chinese Indonesian, but grew up in the Netherlands. And so that's starting there. Then they both moved to Canada, where I was born, where we lived for a few years. Then my dad moved back to the Netherlands. My mom and I moved to Mexico for a few years. Then when I was 5 years old, we moved to the Netherlands to be with my dad. There I spent most of my life. So did all my high school and everything there, university, and then went to Mexico again for 6 months, not very long. Then we just shouldn't forget anything. Then back to the Netherlands and to Brazil for an internship, 6 months again. And then Netherlands, and then Singapore, and then the UK. So I've also moved to the UK for a year, and I came back to Singapore about a year ago.
Would you consider yourself a global citizen?
I mean, there's a lot of places. I can't even count like how many countries that you have.
I mean, I wouldn't dare to say the word global citizen, but but yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what about yourself?
So for myself, I was in Vietnam. I was born in Vietnam. I was born in Hanoi. Grew up in Hanoi until I was about 16 years old. Then I took the first flight of in my entire life to the US. So I spent about 4 years in the US. Went to high school. Went to university in the US. In US, I was spending 1 year in California in Bay Area. And then after that, I spent about 3 years in Pennsylvania, which is totally very different compared to California. Right after my graduations, I moved back to Vietnam, stayed in Hanoi for a year with my family, experienced a total reverse cultural shock, because definitely Hanoi is a place that's very traditional. After a year in Hanoi, I moved to Ho Chi Minh City, also still within Vietnam, but a lot more kind of global vibe, more than in Hanoi. Stayed there for about 7-8 years and recently moved to Singapore.
So you said that Ho Chi Minh and Hanoi, even two cities in the same country, felt different for you?
Very, very different.
What were the key differences?
I think people in Hanoi are just more reserved, more traditional, less open to changes. They value something like the familiar, something familiar with them. For Ho Chi Minh City, things move a lot faster. People are less traditional. Like for example, in Hanoi, most of my friends in Hanoi who are about maybe 25, 26 years old, they already married. They probably have the first kid already. But for in Ho Chi Minh City, people are just more focused on growing their careers, growing their professions, and being less traditional than in Hanoi.
Do you think it is because the city has more people from other countries with different cultures living inside Ho Chi Minh? That is why they are more open in that sense, do you think?
I don't know, because I think it's also kind of a chicken and egg kind of problem, because people in Ho Chi Minh City are also a lot more open to people coming from different area of the country or different part of the world, coming into Ho Chi Minh City as well. While for Hanoi people, we keep the circle very close. So for example, sometimes we don't hang out with people from different district, because we just try to keep the circle very close. So so I don't know if it's because a lot of people coming into Ho Chi Minh City, that's why people are more open, or because people are more open in Ho Chi Minh City, that's why a lot of people coming into Ho Chi Minh City. Because even within Vietnam, a lot more people from not in some other area outside of Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City come into Ho Chi Minh City more than people come to Hanoi, because they find it difficult to adapt to the culture that are too closed.
Yeah.
So that's why the people prefer Ho Chi Minh City. Like for me, like I'm from Hanoi. I was born in Hanoi. I grew up in Hanoi. Like my entire family is in Hanoi, but I still prefer Ho Chi Minh City.
You know, so what I like to think about things from an interest, another point of view. So, for example, in let's say Europe or any other countries in the Western world, right? Did you experience like being in the same country, different cities, and you still experience something that's not the same?
Good question. So I think from the countries where I've lived, I've only lived in one city actually. So I don't think I can answer that, to be honest. But I think visiting other cities, you would, like, so let's take the Netherlands as an example, right? I grew up in Amsterdam, and Rotterdam is the next big city. They're both relatively big for the Netherlands. I mean, they're still tiny compared to real global cities. But there's always this rivalry. So I think you grow up thinking that yes, that other city is different, and you maybe even grow up thinking or being told that city is less than our city.
Right.
And it's vice versa, right? It's not. So the way they speak is different. I guess the culture will be slightly different. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So the next question is, why did you choose Singapore as your current, or rather at that point of time, your next destination to be in?
Yeah, so for me it was, the first time I came to Singapore was in 2013. So I was still studying, I'm a master's I think, and we came with the study association, and I loved it. Like it was a group of students, and we went to MBS and party and stuff.
I was about to ask, what do you love about Singapore?
Yeah, well, MBS was, so you have to imagine, right? Amsterdam is this tiny country, and so is Singapore, but I think Singapore is very global, and Amsterdam portrays itself that way, but it isn't really. So it's tiny, and I think what characterizes the culture in the Netherlands is this saying in Dutch. I guess the translation would be just be normal, and that's already like crazy enough. So it's really very much around, just be normal, stay on your radar, that kind of thing. And then we came here with a group of students, and we went to MBS, and it's all very lavish and all huge, and 60th floor or whatever it is. And like in Amsterdam, the highest building is 20, 30 floors. That's it doesn't get higher. So everything was big and shiny and new. So I loved it, and I wanted to come to Singapore back then. Then fast forward, went back to the Netherlands. Fast forward a couple of years, then my parents moved to Malaysia. For retirement, and my dad became ill, so I wanted to be a bit closer. And then I think that was just, I always wanted to live in Singapore, why not now? And that's when I came.
Actually, I think it's out of this topic, but why did your parents choose Malaysia for retirement?
Because of the currency exchange rate or what?
It is. I mean, honestly, it is a cheaper country than the Netherlands. So I guess your pension is just, you can live better with your pension. And it's, so my dad was Asian, right? So he, not from Malaysia, but it's a bit closer culturally for him.
Oh yeah, Bahasa, right?
Yeah, he didn't speak Bahasa, but I guess he grew up in Indonesia, or part of his life. So just cheaper, nice weather, good food, more relaxed lifestyle as well.
He must have been very supportive of them. You're like, oh my god, it's next to Singapore. Yeah, you should go Malaysia.
Yeah, exactly. I thought, oh no, yeah. But no, it was great. Yeah.
So Alice, what about you? Why Singapore?
To be honest, I didn't choose Singapore.
Singapore chose you?
Singapore chose me.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah,
please elaborate.
Because to be honest, I was in Vietnam. I had a very kind of well thought out plan on the next couple of years what I'm gonna do in Vietnam. I had a business idea. I wanted to launch it in Vietnam. I really wanted to be in Vietnam because I think that's the best place, for me. And I just saw a job post on LinkedIn, and I was like, okay, I'm just gonna apply just for fun, because I think at that time I had a lot of time in my hand. I think it was during COVID, and it was kind of a job opportunities at a very big company. So at that time I was just interviewing for fun, to be honest. At that time I was just interviewing for fun. A lot of people would say why would you even bother to spend time to go on job interview just for fun? But I think it's really fun because first of all, because like you don't have the pressure of having to get that job, right? And I think that is the very good opportunities for you to learn about that company. Like that's the best way for an outsider to learn about that company, right? You can ask people who are working there about what's the role is like, what's the different things like in the company. And I think it's also to understand about myself as well, because like as I go through the job interview process, of course, like I will have to explain myself a lot. I have to sell myself a lot to the interviewer. Also, because I want to understand, what is my value to the job market. Like, am I underpaid? Can I negotiate a better salary or whatever? So it's just like kind of like interviewing for fun. And to be honest, at that time I lied to the people who like kind of like interviewing for that role that, hey, are you open to relocate to Singapore? And I said, yes, of course. Even though deep down inside I was like, probably I'm not gonna relocate to Singapore. But because like as I was like interviewing for that role, I think it was a very interesting role. That's a role at the company that I really want to go, and then somehow they offer me, so that's why I'm here.
Have you been to Singapore before that?
I was in Singapore like a couple of times. Like before that, travel, business trip. Yeah. So I mean, like to be honest, my impression of Singapore is like, because again I'm from like Vietnam, also like a Southeast Asian country. So for me, okay, like Singapore has some kind of similar vibe, but it's also very, very different. But I think that to me back then, Singapore is a bit boring, of course, compared to Vietnam.
It's okay, I agree, it's okay.
I think Cameron is thinking maybe I should go to Vietnam next.
I mean, for me, it's just quite boring, like compared to Vietnam.
Yeah,
like Singapore is very small countries, right? Like why Vietnam is a very big country. Like you can go to the mountain, you can go to the beach, you can go anywhere, experience like many different type of food, and like we have like hundreds of millions of people in Vietnam. While Singapore is a very small, tiny little island. So yeah, for me it was just mainly because of the job, but that's why I said, I didn't choose Singapore, Singapore chose me.
What was it? Oh, sorry?
Was that the only job you applied for in Singapore, or you actually applied to different ones?
No, it was the only job that I applied for in Singapore, because again, I wasn't even like open to the idea of relocation.
And in other countries? Did you apply in other countries?
I mean, like, if I want to relocate to another country, I would prefer maybe like Thailand, where it's more fun than in Singapore.
Yeah, so that, just now you talked about impressions, right? So after living in Singapore, have your impression of Singapore changed?
I mean, it definitely changed. Definitely changed.
For the good or bad?
Oh, it's definitely better. Definitely better. Because I mean, like, of course, like a lot of people, like tourists, when they come to Singapore, they will say that, Singapore is very boring. Like compared to some other travel destinations, like we have like Thailand, we have like Vietnam, or even have like South Korea, we have Japan, so a lot more fun was like happening there. But I think it's just on the surface. Like as you live in Singapore, as you try to understand the culture a little bit, like deeper, try to engage with the local, try to understand the culture here. Actually, Singapore is a lot like more interesting than on the surface, because like it's really diverse. There are a lot of different people coming from like different background. Like let's say 6 million people in Singapore, but I guess like 3 million are really like Singapore citizens, right? Like the other half is like the mix of a lot of different countries, different culture, different personalities. So I think it's just overall it creates like Singapore is a very, very diverse culture that you would never be able to understand within a couple of days traveling into Singapore.
Yeah. So,
I agree. Like I think one of the one of the things I love about Singapore, and it might just be outside of Europe, to be honest, but everybody speaks multiple languages. Like back in Europe, as a kid, you grow up speaking multiple languages, and everybody's like, "Oh, that's so amazing!" But here, everybody speaks it, and I think that's incredible. And maybe for you guys, it's very normal, but I still think it's incredible that just everybody speaks languages.
Actually, I thought Europeans speak more than one language usually,
Not
because it's like their
fluent.
native
not
language.
fluent.
Yeah, like you would get like, I guess like you guys in high school, you would get like random languages, but like at high school level. But I think here, because it's, as you say, like it's such a melting pot of cultures and nationalities and languages, people actually speak the languages like properly. And yeah, I think that's incredible.
So what's your, okay, so you came in 2013.
Yeah.
Before that, what was your impression of Singapore? Before you even landed in Singapore?
Honestly, I don't think I had an impression of Singapore. Like I just didn't
Then why do you
really
choose Singapore
think
to
about
do
it.
your student exchange or?
No, so it was more of a trip. Like it was, so I was in law school and like they would pay for you to go there. So it was more you get a free trip to Singapore. Sure.
So what was your research about Singapore before you came? Like anything you read about it? Nothing?
No, I just googled it and saw the, the
Best party
MBS and that type of stuff.
MBS.
Yeah. I didn't know it was that expensive. That was what caught us out. Because the trip was paid for, but then everything on the ground you had to pay for yourself, and it was so expensive.
Was that your impression? Would you say that is your impression after you experienced Singapore? Like being expensive is one of the things?
It's not what stuck with me actually. I think what stuck with me was the fun, and I think that's completely contrary to what you were saying, and I guess to the general image of Singapore. But we just had so much fun that week. We almost came 2 weeks, I think. It was so much fun.
So let's say like, because after that you moved back home, right? Then you
Yeah.
came back for extended period of time. So when you actually leave here and you talk to the locals, probably like your work or whatever, so did your impression of Singapore change after that?
Yeah, I think after living, you realize that MBS is not. You may do that every now and then, but it's not something that you're not there every night. Firstly, probably because most people's wallets couldn't afford that. Like I know I couldn't, but it's not. Like it's part of Singapore, but it's not the real Singapore, right? So yes, it has changed, and I think for me, COVID was a big part as well. Like how it changed. Like before COVID, I think when I landed, it was lots of fun as well, and lots of parties and boat parties. That's something that in the Netherlands we would never even think of doing, like other than on the canals. But here, like you rent like this tiny yacht. It's pretty cool. But then again, I think that's just the first few honeymoon years. I don't know if you experienced that the same way, but like the first few years, it's just you do everything that's new and that's cool, and then after a while, you sort of get into real life, and that's I think where I am right now, where it's a lot more relaxed, more mellow, and maybe even a bit boring. Yeah.
Actually, to be honest, we as Singaporeans, we would gladly agree. I think most Singaporeans would gladly agree that Singapore is boring.
That's why you see everyone goes out on the weekends. Like
Yeah.
weekends, they go to like short trips to Malaysia, JB.
Yep.
Like
This is why the shopping malls are so crowded, because there's nowhere else to go.
Yep.
Yeah. So
Actually, speaking of shopping malls, I think that's one of the more interesting scenes in Singapore is that retail is not dying as compared to other countries. Like in China, retail is dying because everyone's shopping online.
Sure.
But Singapore is like it's a source of entertainment.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah. Okay, so the next question is, we'll go a little bit deeper later about some other cultural stuff that we want to know from your perspective. But why did you come to offline?
So for me, I think I've changed over the last few years, and it's just, I think again, COVID, a lot of people left, so I just needed new friends. That's basically the short answer.
Okay, and Alice?
And for me, why I came to offline is because I came here like a year ago, right, and really for work. So definitely, I make friends with like the people in the office. They're all great people. I love hanging out with them. But I mean, I just want to develop a social circles outside of work. Also, I want to kind of like get to know the local people a lot better. That's how I can experience and also understand more about the culture. Also, I just want to step outside of my comfort zone a little bit because you don't know what's out there, right? You don't know like how interesting that like connections or that conversations gonna be. So that's why I just came to offline with a very open-minded that, hey, just doing something new, like meeting new people. Don't know what's gonna like take me, but I'm open for it.
Before you came to Singapore, did you expect to, which is a bit related to the question, did you expect to meet and mix around with the locals? Or to you it was just like, it probably wouldn't happen so much?
No, I was definitely hoping to, yeah.
Yeah. Did it happen?
No.
Okay.
Very, very little, I think, until more recently. And it might have been me just not being open to it, or the certain things that you, like subconsciously, right? Not being open to it. But or the activities that you choose to do, maybe, that it just draws more foreigners. And then also I think the previous company that I worked with was, there were a lot of international people as well. So yeah, I think over the last 6 to 12 months, it's been more of a local immersion.
So what are the different types of stuff that you think you would do, but it's a little bit different from what the locals would do? Apart from... Okay, so-
SBS.
Yeah. So I think, so for example, the frequency of traveling. So not traveling necessarily, but just the frequency of traveling. If I look at my expat friends and me, like everybody just travels so much that also it just makes it more difficult to connect, like to build up something real back home here in Singapore, unless you travel together. So that's one of the things. I think you would do everything that's new to you, right? So for me, again, the yacht parties were new, and the countries around here were new. And I recognized that when I went to the UK, that I traveled a lot in Europe again, because it was newish to me, because I spent a few years here. So I think just almost always guaranteed there will be, at least in the beginning, sort of a disconnect, because you will be interested in things that are very normal to people who grew up here.
Where do you think you met Singaporeans? Can you recall?
Where I met Singaporeans?
Yeah, apart from Maki, where else did you meet Singaporeans?
Like where I could have met them, or where I have
Where
actually
have you
met
met
them?
them?
I think for now it's mostly work and offline, actually.
Okay,
Like yeah.
Okay. Alice, what about you? Did you expect to meet more Singaporeans before you came, and did you manage to meet more Singaporeans?
I mean, of course, I think I have always wanted to, study overseas, live overseas. It's because I feel like, traveling just a couple of days wouldn't allow you to fully experience, the culture and like really understand about, the country, also the people there. So definitely when I moved to Singapore, I definitely expect that I would, hang out with the local. I have like a couple of, Singaporean friends, even prior to when I moved to Singapore, because my previous company was also like international companies. I have a kind of like office in Singapore, so like I already have a couple of Singaporean friends when I moved here. I think like being a foreigner in a new country definitely. It's easier to hang out with other foreigners, because we just share the same experience of coming into Singapore, right? Like, hey, how do you find Singapore? Yeah, like kind of like just experiencing going like here and there, like all the popular kind of like foreigners like spots. But I mean, I don't want to just leave to just move to a countries and then live there like a couple of years and then hang out with all the foreigners, and then after that move back to my country or move to another country without really understanding about that culture, right? So that's why hanging out with the local is definitely how like we understand more about the culture.
Okay. Yeah.
I have a question. So after you came, right, you wanted to meet more locals. So I guess you said that you met most from the workplace at first. So what else do you do anything out of your way to actually meet more locals?
Going to offline. Yeah, that's how I go out of my way to meet the local. Maybe like meeting the local through a friend of friend. Yeah, but that's about it, because again, for me, I'm not that like social kind of person that I just go out and just say hi to everyone, like in the bar, on the street. So that's why like having a place like offline is a very good place for people to connect.
Okay, so the next question, I'm just going to jump this question a little bit. I think it's a good time to ask. What is your impression of Singaporeans? Tough question.
It is.
Think carefully.
Yeah. I'm sure we can edit things out if needed. Do you want to start for this question, actually? Thank you. So kind. So I think Singaporeans are very, of course, very generalizing this, but I think Singaporeans are very friendly once you get under the surface. Like once you get under the sort of reserved, I don't know if it's protection or something, but you know, there's this sort of distance that you have. I think everybody has that to some certain extent, regardless whether you're from Singapore or from somewhere else. But I think in Singapore just a bit more.
Yeah.
So once you get through that, I think, and you see the genuine Singaporean, genuine human below it, quite fun actually. I think most people that I've met are quite bubbly. Like once they again let that guard down, they're quite energetic and bubbly. Which from the surface you wouldn't say at all. Like my first impression, I think if you would just come straight off the plane, is everybody's quite reserved. It's difficult to make contact. You know, if you talk to someone, I have the impression that some people think that I want something from them. Like, you know, like the guys on the street and girls on the street that I don't even know what they're trying to say. I think it's for charity, but you know, like at the MRT stations where they, like, and I don't even know because I also still no, sorry, no interest. So it just feels like they treat me like them, like I'm, you know, trying to sell them charity or whatever. Yeah, I think that's the first point, and then. I think growing up in Singapore, it's a very nice country, right? It's very well organized, very safe, and it's, I mean, I dare to say in a lot of ways, probably the nicest country in at least Southeast Asia, but probably in Asia and, you know, potentially in the world even. So I think that brings a certain standard that if you go abroad, it might likely not meet up to that standard. So in terms of organization, I mean, pretty much everywhere in Southeast Asia, it's not, you know, the MRT is not as nice as here. The streets, I mean, if there even is a sidewalk, it's not going to be as nice as here, right? that kind of stuff. Yeah. Yeah, so I think that brings a certain, I guess, being used to a high standard of living. Yeah.
Alice, what is your impression of Singaporeans?
So I told you guys that most of my Singaporean friends I met like through work, even either like through my previous company or this company, right? So my first impression of Singaporeans is that they are very efficient, especially when it comes to working. Like they're very efficient, like really like no bullshit kind of, you know, like people, like really get the work done and get the quality work done. Because definitely I'm from Vietnam, I can say that, you know, not all the Vietnamese are that, you know, efficient or try to put, you know, the best work out there. So I think that's something that I noticed about Singaporeans. So that's one thing, but also I can also relate to Cameron's point about being used to the high standard of living. Like everything here is very nice, everything here is very safe, everything here is very convenient, which leads to one of the things that I feel like Singaporeans complain a lot. I'm sorry to all the Singaporeans, but because I can totally understand why, you know, the Singaporeans kind of like complain a lot, because again they come from a very you know, like really good background, like growing up in a very good environment. So let's say for me, if the bus is late about, you know, 5 minutes, not a problem for me, because like in Vietnam, like the bus can, you know, like just skip the stop and just go like right in front of you. But you know, in Singapore, it's very different. The standard that you guys are used to are very high up here. Yeah. So it's like when it's like this, then you guys are very upset. But because like when I grew up, it's like down here. Yeah. So that's why like when I see the standard here, I'm like, oh, that's good. You know, happy about everything. Yeah. So yeah, that's my. On this.
Can I ask something about the work culture? Yeah. Because I know Vietnamese, right? When y'all work in Vietnam, you have a 1 hour lunch break and you have a 1 hour nap.
Yes.
so their lunch break are 2 hours.
What do you mean 1 hour nap? What do you nap?
They nap
we
in
need
the
to
office.
nap.
They have a chair, they have a bed.
What?
Either on the chair, or you can have a very thin mattress like on the floor, and you can just like take a nap. So for example, like at the moment, when I go back to Vietnam to go on my business trip, typically I would try to squeeze and maximize the time because again I'm a maximalist. So I try to set up a meeting at around like 1:30, right after lunch, right? And sometimes I come to the office of my clients, and their staff was like laying down on the floor and sleeping, and the light was all turned off, and I was like, oh, I has to try to sneak into the meeting room, and then the people who was like meeting was like, oh, sorry, people are taking nap. I said, oh yeah, I understand the culture.
Wait, you mean everyone slept at the same timing?
Yeah.
So it's like a childcare, like all the kids. That's the only time I see everyone sleeping together in the childcare. Like,
Yeah.
Wow.
So that's something that surprised me about coming to Singapore is napping, like how it's generally accepted to sleep. Like in restaurant staff would sleep like on the table, right? And, but even in the office, you would have people napping on their desk. Like, it doesn't happen that often, but it happens. And I had never seen that in my life before I came here. Like in the Netherlands, you just wouldn't do that. You sleep at home and that's it.
I think in Singapore it's because our lunch break is generally speaking is 1 hour. So how you use that 1 hour is up to you. So if I'm really tired, I'll nap on my desk. I'll eat faster, then I'll nap on just on the desk, but not like they have a mattress. That's yeah. So when you came to Singapore, there's no nap culture, right?
Yeah.
So did you was there an adjustment or like?
I mean, because like I used to working in international settings already, so I don't nap like often. Of course, like sometimes when I'm like very tired, okay, I'll take about like 30 minutes nap. But actually, like napping is not that bad. I mean, like if you take like half an hour nap, but then your productivity is boosted by like 50%. It's better than like you not using that 30 minutes and just trying to work on a very like low quality kind of work, right? Like you are not that focused. So I think napping is not that bad. I mean, I think napping is good. I think like every office should have like some of the area for employees to nap when they want to, so that they can increase the quality of work. But yeah, I think but with in Singapore, I think like Singaporean work like very efficient because like they just like put the head down and just like really like get the most work done within that 1 hour. While like for Vietnamese people, to be honest, like sometimes we can be like, hey, like what's happening? Like sometimes like like chatting, sometimes gossiping. So I mean that's something I learned like from the Singaporeans.
There's something that I really want to know, which is in your previous experiences where you napped together as a team. Did anyone snore?
Of course.
Does that guy get singled out, or the lady get singled? Or what happens if someone snores?
That's how you get
I
the
mean,
private
you get used
room.
to it. I mean, you have to get used to it. If you want to get the nap done, then you have to get used to it, or find some other spot. Yeah.
Okay, so
he's really shocked.
because I'm somebody that I can't, like if somebody snores, that's it. I can't sleep. I don't know why. I'm a light sleeper.
I mean, that not everyone like need to take a nap because I think like it's more for. I mean, there's a napping culture, but I mean, like not everyone needs to take a nap. Like it's not for like everyone, but it's normal to take a nap like in between.
I mean, I do have napping culture, but that was in high school. I would just nap when the teacher is speaking.
But I mean, like actually, like companies in Vietnam, they start very early on. They can start about like 8.
Because I realized something, because I just came back from Vietnam, right? I think it's because the day starts 1 hour earlier. It's 1 hour behind Singapore, but actually the time zone is actually it's technically the same, but I don't know why you're 1 hour earlier.
Actually, because like in Vietnam, I can wake up like very easily at like 6 a.m. because like at that time the sun is already like up, high. You can see the sunlight and stuff. In Singapore, like it's so difficult to wake up at around like 7 because like I can't even see the sunlight at around like 7.
Yeah,
so I think that everything like in Vietnam start like very early. Like the bank probably start around like 8. So everyone like go to work and very early. So I think like because they wake up so early, they go to work like that early. I think they deserve that, like half an hour or 1 hour nap in between, right? Because it's very early on.
Okay, so this is a topic about culture, right? Like some people nap, and then maybe we don't see napping culture in another part of the world. What is the biggest culture shock you have seen since you came to Singapore?
I think it's what I had to get used to is the lack of chit chat. Like you won't have random chat with people on the streets, or I mean, we spoke about this previously, but in the lifts, where you would. And I'm not sure if it's Singaporean. I think the Netherlands is the weird one, to be honest. But we would, like, if you go to the lift, you would say hi to everyone, and then like not individually, but you would just say morning, and then everybody would say morning, or nod back or something. And then here on my first day at work, I did the same, and then no, everybody's like looks up and like what, and then looks like on their phone.
So in our previous episode, we talked to Chloe, who experienced the same thing in, I think, Switzerland. What was their reaction when you said, like, and how do you feel after that?
I mean, I felt like, why are you guys ignoring me? Like, I'm just trying to greet you. But I thought it was a bit strange. But I guess so. I guess for me, the topic of just striking up conversation with random people, that's the main shock, that you just don't do that here. And I think another example, for example, at work, if you ask somebody like, how was your weekend, then it's just like, yeah, good. And then you're like, okay, what did you do? And they're like, yeah, no, it's, not much. And then I always wonder, like, do you just not want to tell me, or did you actually not do much? And I've been here for a few years now, so I think, actually, I still have no clue.
Do you still ask that question now?
Yeah, I do.
We found the answer in the last episode.
The Chloe's answer, is it? Yeah.
You know what are they thinking when they hear you say good morning?
What?
Who are you?
Really?
Have I forgotten this person? Because they're trying to recall if this is somebody that they knew but they couldn't remember. Right? That was the answer,
I think
right?
that's the answer.
You kind of understand where it's coming from?
Really? So if somebody asks you that, that's why they ask you, because they're just trying to stall to figure out who you are.
No, because the thing is that when you walk into a room or a lift of strangers, right, nobody knows you. And when you say hello, it's not or how are you, it's not like a normal thing to do. So people will be like, are you talking to me? And do I know you from before?
Yeah.
And if I don't know you, I better not say anything, because in case I forgot.
So they're processing, right? Imagine if I talk to this person, I forgot the name, and it feels almost bad. Yeah, so it's that's what we figured out in the last time we talked about this.
I think just not a culture in general.
Yeah.
But that's.
But keep trying.
Yeah, I mean, I will change. Together with you, I will change the country.
Wow.
I think the question on the what do you do over the weekend, right? I think it's also part of the whole efficiency culture, where people don't think there's any value add in that kind of chit chat, in that kind of interaction.
Yeah.
Like they rather use the time to get work done, and
Yeah.
maybe they can just go home earlier.
Yeah.
I think that might be one of the reasons.
So what is your biggest culture shock that you experienced?
And to be honest, like coming from Vietnam, and you're also kind of like very familiar with Singapore culture previously, and kind of like big cultural shock. But one of the shock that I kind of realized when I started to live here is that like people in Singapore is very family oriented. Yeah.
More than you have expected.
Yeah, more than what I expected. I think like a lot of people just like get married like very early, very just very family oriented. Like, I think like the conversations surround relationships, like having boyfriend, girlfriends, when are you gonna get engaged, when are you gonna get married, is something like very popular topic among like Singaporeans. And somehow coming here, I kind of like feel a little bit of pressure for kind of like being single.
Just imagine us.
Because it's very like similar to where I come from. So it's very similar to Hanoi. So Hanoi also like that. Like people always ask like, "Hi, like good morning. Hi, how are you? Are you single? Are you married?"
Oh, really?
Even if you already have a boyfriend or girlfriend, the next question they're gonna ask is, "When are you gonna get married?" And if you are married, the question they're gonna ask is, "When are you gonna have kids?" And if you already have kids, when are you gonna have the next kid?
Yeah. So that is the culture
a
in
lot
Singapore.
of question about families and stuff. Not so much in Ho Chi Minh City. Like in Ho Chi Minh City, people don't care about it that much. But I'm surprised that in Singapore, like people care so much about relationship status, and also getting married, and also building family. I guess it's all connected to like the BTO kind of things, but I don't know if that's the main reason.
Do you think it's the opposite in your part of the world?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's very I mean, it would come up at some point, but it's, you know, like, and if you meet somebody, it would come up maybe at some point, like, are you in a relationship? But, for example, are you married? I don't think anybody would ask that. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, from the point, if you're in a relationship, you're committed to someone, it doesn't matter whether you're married or not, or whether you have like we have this thing called it's like a registered partnership, where it's almost the same as a marriage legally, but it's not. So yeah, it's very different. I think a lot of people don't get married even, but they do spend the rest of their lives together without ever being married.
Do you know that the question of when are you getting married is asked on a yearly basis in Singapore?
Really? Like
Yeah,
around Chinese New Year?
Chinese New Year?
Yeah.
Oof, you have to dodge the question. You have to like, if you see your aunt there, let me take another route, let me go somewhere else and avoid the question. Because after you answer that, which is fine, but if you have like 7 aunts, life is tough. That is why I think the culture is set from all these behaviors around, like when people ask you every year, you start to wonder yourself.
Yeah.
It's like, oh yeah, maybe I should get a girlfriend or a wife or whatever, right? So yeah, that's a bit of a culture which you don't know, right?
No.
Yeah.
And how much of that do you think, because you raised it, how much of that is started with BTOs, like around the expecting to get married early and family?
Okay, my take. Let me say, I want to hear everyone's take. I think the BTO set the culture for people to marry early for sure. Can I say the next part? Wait, let me think. I think it's a necessary move in our society, but I think it has its repercussions.
Yeah.
So for example, when somebody says, oh, we need to get the house, let's get married. Are you getting married because you need a house? Or are you getting married because you love the person?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, we could have different perspective about what is right and what is wrong. What is your take?
I think, okay, the thing about BTO, right, is that you have to plan 5 to 6 years in advance. I don't think people get married early, to be honest. My friends are 30 and they're just getting married or going to get married, which I don't think is considered early in general. But they have to plan early. So, and I think that caused them to be in very long-term relationships. Like my friends who get married, they're all in at least 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years of relationships.
Yeah.
And that's quite amazing, to be very honest. I think that sets that kind of BTO culture where you have to plan earlier. So I guess that question will come in earlier as well. But getting married and signing the official papers, I don't think necessarily.
What is your take? Do you think it affects? Based on your understanding that it affects the culture of people getting together?
I think it's definitely affect the culture because from where I come from, if you have money, you can buy any house you want. You don't have to be married in order to own a house. And even if you get married, then it's no advantage in terms of you getting a house or whatever. So that's why people kind of separate out the married part and also the owning a house part. Of course, for people who want to build, their family, they want to get a house or they want to own, let's say, an apartment in order for their, small family to live in. But I guess, the house part kind of come first before the getting married. But in here, I think it's in reverse. So getting married in order to get a house.
Yeah.
So I think definitely kind of influence the decision of people in terms of their, marriage status.
Because I met, in my previous workplace, I met this couple. They had a kid and they weren't married, but they were living together. So along the line of what you said just now. And that's when I realized wow, the emphasis on marriage here is a bit different from, let's say, a Caucasian, because they have that. That was an eye-opener for me.
Yeah.
Just how different the culture is. Okay, so the question was, what is something about Singapore or local culture that you find it hard to comprehend?
Yeah. So I just got a good hint. Thank you. But no. So we're talking about Singlish first, which I think is really interesting because given that English is the main language, it's really interesting to see that something like Singlish could find its way to mainstream. Like, people speak more Singlish than English, I think. At least, maybe at work now, but like in the general public. And I don't know, but I assume it's sort of a mix of like Chinese influence, like Chinese sayings literally translated to English, for example. But it just makes it sound really, really, niche is not the right word, but it's very specific to Singapore. Like even in Malaysia, you won't have it, right? So I like it, but I do wonder, how do you learn in school? Like I assume you just learn English, right, and not Singlish. So where does that difference come from? Like where do people, I guess, commit to Singlish rather than English?
Do you know how it transpired into?
I think it's just a mix of Chinese, Malay, and dialects and English. So how my Indonesian friend who described Singlish is that it's in English but using Chinese grammar.
Yeah.
True.
Actually,
Probably true.
there's a mix. There's a good mix. So I think for example, I grew up with Malay friends, Indian friends, Chinese friends. So for example, in the table, right, you almost want to speak to everyone, but you have to change the tone a little bit.
Yeah.
If I speak Mandarin here, the tone will be like this, and then I turn away, I'll speak English, I will speak in another tone. So like everyone is kind of maybe a bit confused at the point of time, but they take it all in, and when something comes out, it's just a mix.
So everybody understands at the same time.
Yeah. Actually, it's not just Mandarin or influence from Malay or Indian language. I think a little bit of dialect as well. Like if you go like a little bit deeper to our parents' generation, like if I talk to my dad, the tone is a little bit different if I use a dialect. But sometimes my brain kind of process, if I talk English, I'll use that tone.
Yeah.
And suddenly it sounds a bit weird. So I think that's how the origins of, I think, okay? I don't know, some people might have a different answer.
But to answer your question, no, you didn't learn in school.
No, right?
We
So
don't learn in
that's
school.
like, I always wonder, like, how does it become so mainstream if what you learn is English?
That's a good question.
I think it's really from social.
Yeah.
Because I came to Singapore without knowing a word of English. I learned English in school, but my Singlish is really from my friends. I meet in school.
Yeah. But so that's what I like about Singlish, because I think it symbolizes, the melting pot of cultures and languages, and how that brings forward something new.
Yeah.
That's sort of from everyone.
But do you understand when you hear it?
I struggle sometimes. It depends on how strong the accent is. Like I think I can, unless it's like a Chinese word in there, I can generally make it up what somebody's saying, unless the accent is extremely in them.
Do you think it's the speed? Is the speed?
Yes, it's the speed as well, and sometimes it's very abrupt. Like it's not very, very soft. It's just very hard and fast, and then I struggle.
Singaporeans are efficient with their words.
Yeah, exactly.
What about you? What's something that you cannot comprehend the culture in Singapore? You can't understand.
This is very tough questions because if I find something that's really strange, something very different compared to my culture, and I'll try to dig deeper into that and try to understand why people behave a certain way. So I kind of understand why people do that. Similar to I was wondering why people get married so early on. So I was like, probably because of the BTO. But for me, probably because I don't understand how people can queue for so long.
Yep. I have to agree.
Wait, what are you talking about? Specifically,
anything. First of all, food. How people can queue for that long. For example, half an hour. If I can see the queue in front of a restaurant, in Vietnam, I'm just I'm not gonna go to that restaurant anymore, even though I'm craving for it. Yesterday, Taylor Swift ticket. Oh my God.
Yeah.
People was queuing at SingPost for 2 days, more than 24 hours. Oh my God! How can people queue for that long? Yeah, that's something that I can't comprehend, to be honest.
Actually, yesterday I was talking to some foreigner friends as well. Then they were saying, in Singapore, when they see a queue, they join the queue. But overseas, when they see a queue, they run away.
Yeah. But that's actually a thing that happens. I was speaking to a couple of friends, and they said, if we see a queue, sometimes we will just join it, and then one of us will wait, the other one will figure out what we're queuing for. What?
Yeah. No, I think we find it. How would I put it? I think Singaporeans believe that if there's a queue, it means something good is happening. Yeah, but it's just in our culture, like when something good is happening, they want to be part of it. I think.
Honestly, I think it's a part of the kiasu culture.
Yeah. You know what's a kiasu culture?
Means scared to lose.
Oh, like FOMO.
FOMO, yeah.
Basically FOMO.
That makes
but
strong.
Very strong. So they don't want to miss out on anything good.
Yeah.
So they have to figure out what is it.
Well, and I think another thing on queuing, which I like, if there's something free, even though if it's very low value, I would think, I'm not sure if standing 2.5 hours in line for a $5 cup of coffee or whatever is worth it. But
Yeah, people love free stuff.
yeah.
Okay, so still on the topic of culture, Singaporean, global citizen but Singaporean. What is one thing that you always wanted to know about Singapore culture or asked about the culture, but you never had a chance to? You can ask us now.
Yeah, the true blue Singaporean who doesn't know that Malay is not official language.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I know the rest of the stuff, so yeah, feel free to ask.
Yeah, so it's a bit of a serious question, but what do you feel? So it's not a right or wrong question, right? But it's an opinion question. So what do you think about the emphasis in Singapore society on race? And everything is very ordered, like in HDBs, there's X percentage of Indian.
Oh,
X
you know about this.
So what do you feel about that? Because it's made, I think, for a very good intention to make sure societies and races and cultures mix, but it's very doctored, I think. So what do you because it's very artificial. What do you think? What do you guys think?
You can go first.
Okay,
if you want.
I thought about this answer before.
Nice.
I first thought about it when I saw America, like how divided compared to us. I think that doctored part had to be done. Yeah. That is the reason why I grew up with Malay friends and Indian friends. I had the opportunity to do that within my block or within the school. If they didn't set that, I don't think, because by nature we would naturally tend to go to people of our own race, religion. I might not have the opportunity to meet them. I'm not saying a politically correct answer, I'm saying because my closest friend when I was 18 was an Indian. After 21 was a Malay. Before and after there were Chinese as well. So I feel like my life in Singapore I've met people from different cultures. And I know it's very interesting, right? Everyone is a bit different, especially when it comes to religion and culture.
Yeah.
What do you think?
No, I completely agree. Because I mean, there are so many places in the world where it's a complete mess.
Yeah.
Because I think because people don't mix.
Yep.
Because I think by mixing you create understanding, you create tolerance, you create you create an inclusive society. So I think it's great. I just something that shocked me when I just came to Singapore is in my employment contract now, like you had to fill out a form and it's race, religion, all that kind of stuff, which in the Netherlands you're not allowed to ask. So to me it was like, oh, well, why do you need this? And I didn't really want to fill it out, and but I think when I just arrived, because I think it's changed for me, the view on this. When I just arrived, I thought, why is it so? It needs to be natural and everything. But I agree with you now that I think it's a good thing. Yeah.
Okay, so this question I've talked to different people as well, because I didn't realize how unique it is until I went to the States. And there was this, I think one of my TAs was an American, but he studied, actually he lived in Singapore for a bit, and he was telling me how shocked he was when he saw the papers, and they are like, he was looking for a place to stay, and they are saying, like Indians only, or like Malay only. And he was like, that's so racist, because they thought it was a racist thing. But then after that he learned that it's actually just or maybe like a legal thing. You have to only get them. And yes, I think yesterday I was also talking about this. Or I watched a YouTube video some days ago about like this American was saying like how it fostered that kind of open-mindedness and subconsciously, because you see in LA, right, or in any big cities in America, like there's so many like, oh, Chinatown, then it's full of Chinese. Then you cross like a few streets, now it's Koreatown. So like a Vietnamese town. So all these people, even though they're Asians, right? The people who stay there, they don't mix with each other because they all have their own separate districts. So I think that kind of, even though that is a more natural state, but it doesn't give that kind of time or like space for people to mingle as much as they should.
Yeah.
So I'll add on one point, which is, I just thought of an example. I was in London. I remember walking down the street, and somebody shouted as I walked past, "Are you fucking Chinaman?" And then for a moment I was like, okay, first, I'm not from China. Okay, but you mistook me for being a Chinaman, and I think there was no respect.
Yeah.
And what I learned in Singapore is the tolerance and respect is in our culture. So even if there are certain things that is not to your liking, you would respect what the other culture is doing. You give them the space to do. Do I sound like a politician?
But maybe actually to add on, right? I think because the fact that you stay so near to different races, and we live in HDBs where it's like apartment, you just see everyone. And my next door neighbor was an Indian family back years ago, and now it's a Malay family. So even if you don't interact with them, you see what they do. Like when they have like, festival, Hari Raya, Deepavali, you can see part of what they do for their own festivals. I guess you get that kind of, knowledge as well, even though you might not be friends with them.
Yeah.
What is your question that you want to ask, but you didn't have the chance to ask?
I think that this is something that I kind of like I have this question in the back of my mind because I feel like I think the Singaporean government has done a very good job in order to build these communities, in order to build this country that is very developed, very safe, very advanced in technologies. People here are very smart, hardworking, efficient. But I feel like in order for them to make that happen, I think there's a clear path of the different milestones in life of what you have to do at a certain age, at a certain time. And if you just follow that path that has already been set out for you, you'll be kind of good in life. Basically, you probably not gonna be like millionaire, but you're not gonna have to worry about being poor, being in hunger, being in poverty, don't have the roof over your head. Basically, if you just follow that path, you will have a decent life. How would you feel, growing up, knowing that there's that path for you? Because for people, maybe from my country or for me, I don't know what is the path in my life. I just live and figure out that path along the way. But for you guys, I feel like the path is already set out for you. Just follow that. You have a good life. How do you think about it?
I feel like we are the panel answering your question.
Do you think that it's a blessing that you don't have to worry about that? Or do you feel like you wish you would have more of, let's say, freedom or choices in life to figure out, what is life is going to be
I have
for
so
you?
much to say on this topic, but let me structure my thoughts. Yes, I agree. Because, my parents always say, it's a good thing, Singapore government is like a big parent.
Yes.
They take care of every single thing down to the details, like what you should do, and so that you can just live a very decent life. You won't be living on the streets, but as you said, you won't be a millionaire, but you will not be in poverty. I don't think I'm living that life now, that I broke away from the corporate life. That is one step I took out of that path that everyone or my family or the government has set for me. Because it's comfortable. It's very, very comfortable, but I think it gets boring after a while. And I think it's that there is a way to not follow it. It's just lesser road taken. It's just whether you can not follow the norm. Right? Yeah, so I think for me, it's more like I've already taken the road away from it, and it's good to know that I have a backup. I can always go back to it, and there's a safety net hanging, waiting for me if like this path doesn't work out, right? I think that's a good feeling to know, but it's boring.
Okay, so at the start I said this word to describe myself as a rebel. So when you're growing up in Singapore, everyone expects you to score an A, be excel in your academics and stuff, right? I had the mindset that like it doesn't matter. So in fact, I failed a lot, right? And the culture is like, oh, you are like, you need to study harder. For me, maybe I couldn't care less about it. So my mindset, even though within the structure of, oh, you have this life, I'm like, yeah, but I just want to do something else. I just want to play football, for example. I just want to be excel in sports. I just want to try other stuff, music or whatever. And I just followed the path, but knowing that I'm in a restricted zone, but I think I'm fine with it. Yeah, you're going to hear some outside noises, like, oh, you should study harder, you should find this job, you should blah, blah, blah. I just take it with a pinch of salt. It doesn't really... That's why I think there are certain type of people in Singapore, and then there is another type of people like me. Like I would just fail and I was like, yeah, what's wrong? Like nothing wrong. Yeah.
No, but the thing is that even if you fail, right, at the end of the day, you won't die on the streets. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's always like you'll find a job. Maybe not a well-paid one in the end, but you'll find a job. You'll probably be taken care of one way or another. Yeah, I think that's...
It's a very deep topic.
Yeah,
to
it is.
answer. Yeah.
We can move on.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah.
Because I think yeah, it's like I think it's the government who structured it that way, which has led for Singapore to be what it is.
Yeah,
right?
it
This
is.
incredible, wealthy, tiny country. And I think that was the only way to get from where they were, like 60, 70 years ago, to where they are today. So I think it's incredible, but I think now it's about like looking at the next step, like how do you progress?
Yeah, I agree. Because if humans are the only resources, then you have to do certain things to ensure that something comes out of it, right? You have to control it to a certain extent. Whew, going through this conversation without sounding like a politician, oh my God. Okay.
That's how you change the world, man.
True.
Okay, we're going to move on to the next question, right? Now this one, interesting. What is a stereotype that you think locals have of foreigners, like yourself, that isn't necessarily true?
Do you want to start for one? Or?
He's very good at like just shifting it across.
No, I think of course, like I think a lot of the local people think that we are rich, because I remember like when I relocated to Singapore, and there was under my company's like relocation package, like we have a local lady, like helping us to get used to the culture environment. So basically, like we have a car, we have a driver, have that local lady driving me around Singapore and showing me like different areas. So this is a very like Geylang area. This is kind of like botanical garden areas and whole bunch of that. And at that time, because I was just just moved to Singapore a couple of days. I was looking for an apartment, and basically like she just suggested all the very expensive like condo to me and say, oh, here like a lot of expat like living here, like a lot of expat living there, and it's about like 5-6K of rent, and she just like suggested that to me. So I would assume that like she thinks that me moving into Singapore means that I'm rich, I guess. But yeah, I guess it's definitely not true.
Okay.
So where do you end up staying?
I stay around like Paya Lebar.
Paya Lebar.
So like very close here. But again, like I try to, like live below my mean. So like not really like, like try to just living an expat life and just spending money like left and right. But yeah, I think like that's a perception of a lot of Singaporean have for us.
I'm not sure if this is a stereotype that Singaporeans see about foreigners, or that it's a stereotype that I see about foreigners. But I think maybe like, because I think a lot of people come here for like 2 years or something, you know, and I think want to make the most out of it. So I think a lot of people would be out partying every weekend and, you know, being drunk, being the loud drunk Westerner, which I don't think is necessarily true.
Really?
What do you guys think
Is
is
that
a
a stereotype?
I think it is.
Yeah.
Wow.
Of Angmo staying drunk on weekends.
No, I think it's not like there are no drunk Singaporeans. There are.
There are a lot.
I just think that if Angmo gets drunk and they're on the street, it's like, oh, like you see him right there.
Yeah.
But if they're Singaporean, they're all, like so many of them. Right? It's not so what you call it, like apparent.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are you like judging yourself?
No, definitely not. Definitely not. I'm not like that, guys. I'm not like that.
He threw the question back at us.
What's the question?
The stereotype.
What are some
What do we have any stereotype?
Boomerang of foreigners, yes. You don't need to believe that it's not true. Just stereotype. Full stop.
I think the stereotype that I have or like impression of people who comes, they don't stay for very long, which I think I recently actually learned that it's not true because I met people that stay here for very long term. I don't know, is that true? Or
I think there's a lot of people who come for just a short time, because I think there's quite a big part that comes like on a work assignment for like 2 years or something, and then they leave. I do think in Singapore, higher than in other countries, of those people that come for 2 years, people decide to stay. So I do think that a lot of people then decide to like go into a local contract and stay because it's a really nice life in Singapore.
stereotype?
Yeah, I thought of one. This goes way a little bit further back. Is before I had exposure to more expats. I feel like they wouldn't want to talk to us. Somehow, or maybe I just feel like not comfortable talking to them. Maybe because I feel like their English is good, and this and that. But after I met more expats, it's not the case.
Ah,
Yeah, I think they're very easy to talk to.
yeah,
Way easier than Singaporeans.
yeah.
That is true. But yeah, I don't know what. I think when I talk to the expats that I met, I had to deliberately slow down the speed of my speech.
Yeah.
I had to be less lazy about the pronunciation of words, so that I don't have to repeat myself and they can understand it in one go. Because I feel a bit like I have to repeat myself. Like, why didn't they understand? It's just like natural, right? Because when we grow up, we speak so fast. So yeah, that is the stereotype. But all is good now. I love expats.
Such a politically correct.
Exactly. So inclusive.
Okay, we're gonna.
Actually, I have one question,
yeah.
but it's a bit controversial. So feel free to not reply with anything. But now, recent times, the past 1 year or so, the rental prices have increased significantly, and a lot of people are blaming on the foreigners. What's your take on it?
Woo.
So I know that I can't pay, like my rent doubled, and I mean that's
Yeah.
not I don't make enough to pay double rent. So so if it's to blame on the foreigners, it's not on me first. But secondly, I think the foreigners is a pretty big word, right? I mean there's, I don't know, 350 countries in the world. Singapore is one of them, so there's 349 left. Like, I think there's a few countries that came, like during COVID, a lot of people fled, I guess, to Singapore. And I think from those countries, it were the rich people who had the means to flee to Singapore. And potentially because of them, because, they came from, well, let's take Hong Kong, for example, where you pay maybe double the rent of Singapore. They came here, this is cheap. And then obviously, prices started going up. So yeah, maybe. Yeah, but not my fault.
I think I can say that it's definitely because of the, one of the reasons why the rent increased substantially is because of the foreigners, because of the influx of foreigners coming into Singapore, right? we suffer from it as well. Like not
Yeah.
only the
Yeah,
local,
yeah,
like we suffer from it as well. And I think there are a lot of different reasons to that. Also with the supply of like apartments, and also with COVID, and with let's say like people don't want to live with their like parents anymore. They want to rent an apartment. But I think at least for the locals. You guys have your government like care for you, to be honest. Like for sure, like you will have like advantages over foreigners like living in Singapore. So if anything, we feel like we suffer more than the local.
Yeah,
Okay.
I agree. I had this discussion with my previous work actually, and they, I forgot the exact context, but I think it was like, as a local you can go to HDBs and stuff, but I think it's even more than that. Like as a local, you have your family here, so things, if things go really south, you can just move back in. Or I mean, I think most people still live with their parents until you get married, right? So that's a huge chunk out of our salaries if you don't live with your parents, that we don't have a choice. It's that or move out, like to a different country. Yeah.
Okay, so one of the last thing that, last question, we're gonna just tweak it a little bit. You said you speak Spanish,
English, and Dutch.
English and Dutch. Which one are you the most comfortable? I mean, between Dutch and Spanish?
Depends on the question. Like, what do we have to do?
Okay.
Wait.
this language?
So why do you say that? Like, do you use like certain words more frequently in one language? As in, you flirt more in Spanish?
No, I think my Dutch is better, but yeah. I think
Okay, I'll let you decide, right?
Okay,
Say
okay.
for you, Alice,
I don't have to choose. I only
No, so you
know another
just
language
reply
beside
in that,
English,
right? Your own
which is
language, right?
Vietnamese.
Now the question is, if you were to tell somebody, let's say it's Dutch, it will be the Dutch people or the Spanish people or wherever, about what's the thing about talking to and knowing Singaporeans that they should know of? So you can reply, you should talk to us in that language as if we understand it, although we don't.
Okay.
So what would you say?
Oké. Singapore is een heel leuk land. Singaporezen zijn hele aardige mensen. In het begin een beetje gereserveerd. Ze geven heel veel om eten, familie en in de rij staan, wat heel gek klinkt. Maar het is een hele leuke plek en hele lieve mensen.
Great. So
Yeah.
do you just say Singapore is a wonderful country?
I have family. Is it family?
I did, yes. I said Singapore is a really great country to live. Singaporeans are really nice once you get through that initial barrier. They love their food, is what I said. Queuing, I also referred to queuing, so that Singaporeans love to queue, which I find strange. And then I think I repeated that Singaporeans are really nice.
Okay, so before we move to Alice, just a quick one, just for fun. If you saw a lady who could speak Spanish and you were going to hit on her, what would be the opening sentence in Spanish?
Oh man. You're putting me on the spot, man.
Just one sentence, what would you say to the girl?
Honestly, I would probably just ask her what time it
Which
is.
is in
Oh.
Spanish. Yeah.
And then from there, continue the conversation. So I would probably be like, hola, buenas tardes. Oye, ¿me dices qué hora es? And that is like, hi, good afternoon. What time is it? And then, from there you buy yourself hopefully some time.
What time is it?
try
Cameron's time now?
Why don't you ask her what time is it?
3
Because
p.m.
you
No,
don't have
you're
your
wrong.
watch,
It's
you
my
don't have your
No,
phone.
because that's how you start a conversation, right? Like you start about something insignificant, so you're not a threat.
What do you mean, what time is it? You hit on a girl and ask her what time is it?
Yeah, and then from there you start a
Do
conversation.
you reply like, do you know it's my time now?
No, but then, you tell me it's 3 p.m. and I tell you, oh, okay, that's cool. So
okay.
what are you doing at 3 p.m. on a Thursday, Yeah, you like that, yeah.
Okay, so what will you, back to the first one, what would you say to like somebody in Vietnam, right? Like they don't know about Singaporeans and you would say in Vietnamese to them like about Singapore and Singaporeans.
In Vietnamese. rất là nhiều người Việt khi mà đến Singapore thì chắc là mọi người cũng đã đến chơi và đến thăm Singapore rất là nhiều lần rồi, và thực ra là mọi người thì sẽ thấy rằng là nhiều người rất là bảo với cả Alice rằng là Singapore thì nó hơi chán, nhưng mà thực sự thì đó là những cái gì mà mọi người chỉ có trải nghiệm trong một vài ngày thôi, cho nên rằng là nó cũng sẽ rất là khó để mọi người có thể trải nghiệm được cái văn hóa rất là đa dạng của Singapore. Cho nên rằng là chúng mình nhiều khi cũng không có thể nào mà đánh giá một quốc gia, đánh giá một văn hóa quá là trong một cái thời gian rất là ngắn như vậy được, cho nên rằng là nếu mà có cơ hội thì mọi người có thể đến Singapore và trải nghiệm thêm về văn hóa và cũng như là cuộc sống ở tại Singapore.
I know what she said. She said Singaporean
Singapore.
Singaporean guys are very handsome. So what do you say? What do you say? Sorry.
I think you know when she speak, right? I was like, wow, I thought Singaporeans speak very fast, but I thought she was speaking really, really fast.
No
Yeah.
clue. I only recognized Singapore.
Singapore, so the only word that you pick up, right? I mean, like, basically because like Singapore is very close to Vietnam, right? A lot of people like from Vietnam travel to Singapore very frequently, and I think the impression of Singapore for Vietnamese people is that Singapore is boring. But I think living in Singapore, I can definitely say that we can't really judge the book by its cover, by just experience Singapore in a couple of days, like like tourists like visiting like MBS, right? Yeah, but I mean like Singapore is a very diverse culture, and if they have a chance, then I would really highly recommend Vietnamese people to experience like Singapore in deeper and understand more about the culture.